And welcome to another video from the CTAD Clinic. My name's Dr. Mike Lloyd, I'm the director of the clinic. This is a therapy skills video for self-help. The example I'm going to be talking about today is how I've managed to help myself being able to effectively cure a phobia that I've had for probably over 40 years. That phobia is arachnophobia. It is of course a spider phobia, so we are going to be talking a bit about spiders today. Obviously that isn't going to be for everybody, because this helps you understand how a person can effectively overcome a phobia using self-help. The decision to self-heal came because I realised after many years that there are a lot of spiders about, and I have been absolutely terrified of spiders. I remember going to a zoo and they had a greenhouse exhibit, and I went in there and the keeper was doing a talk about the lizards and the snakes and the spiders, and I thought I will stick this one out and see how it goes. And he said, I'm going to bring a spider out as a demonstration, and somebody said, what kind of spider is it? And he said, this is an African jumping spider, and I literally ran out of the greenhouse. So my phobia, and it's a true phobia because it's an unrealistic and completely out of context fear. So I am terrified of things that cannot really do me any harm. So it can get me into an absolute panic state. So if I was sitting on the sofa and I saw a spider scuttling across the floor, I would panic. I would leave the room and I would try and get other people to solve that for me. It's not that I hated spiders, I just couldn't bear to see them, be near them, or know they're in the vicinity. I could not sleep in a room where I knew there was a spider. So the fear of something is absolute. It utterly dominates your thinking in that moment. It doesn't really matter what the phobia is, that thing dominates your thinking, and it causes extreme emotional responses that many other people don't understand. So a lot of phobias seem incredibly trivial to people, but if you have one, it's absolutely not trivial, it's all encompassing. And obviously, me being a clinical psychologist means that I've been trained in cognitive behavioural therapy. It's one of the first things I learned when I was doing my doctorate course. And what that says, effectively CBT, what that says is that using a process of thinking and behaving in different ways, you can overcome emotional responses to things. You can develop an understanding of why you feel or react as you do, and learn to overcome that reaction. So I thought, well, if I'm literally teaching people CBT, I thought, how on earth can I have kept a fear for so long when I'm helping other people overcome their fear? I felt like a fraud, that I'm doing something that I can't even operate on myself. I made the decision then to overcome my phobia, and I had a choice. I could either do it through graded exposure, which is a gradual and systematic approach of the thing that you feel frightened of, which works in what's called a hierarchy. So you start with things that you wouldn't be all that frightened of. So let's say reading a story where there was a spider, or looking at photographs of a spider, or seeing spiders at great distance, and gradually moving towards the object that you're frightened of, each time undergoing relaxation and grounding exercises to manage the emotional expression that you're experiencing. The plan there is that by the time you actually get to be in proximity of the thing that you're frightened of, you have developed a repertoire of skills with which to manage your anxiety and your panic. And so that works very effectively for many people. Sadly though, I have realised that I'm a bit of an all or nothing type personality, which means that spending a year or 6 months or whatever gradually getting close to something just hadn't worked for me. And I know this because I've tried to get close. I've tried to be near them. For example, in the shed, in the garden, I know there are spiders in the shed, and I've tried to approach, but I just couldn't do it. It was too much to do that gradual approach thing. And I couldn't even bear to look at photographs of a spider in a book, and my ultimate fear was that one day a tarantula would be on me. That's a fear, I think, coming from a James Bond film that I saw with Sean Connery. If you've seen the film, you know the scene. If you haven't seen the film and you don't like spiders, don't bother watching that scene. you have the choice then, graded exposure or this other thing which is called flooding, which is the all or nothing response. That's the equivalent of learning how to swim by jumping into the deep end of a swimming pool and staying there until you figured it out, and eventually after a few minutes of complete discomfort you realise that you can do this. That's a bit more my personality type. The other thing that made it important was that I finally worked out why I'm afraid of spiders, because I've never actually known. I've come up with lots of theories, but I've never understood the response. Within myself, it felt like there wasn't the answer. So I was having dinner with my dad one day in a Chinese restaurant in Rhyl, of all places. Here's my dad, here's a photo, he's a very lovely bloke, and it was a very hot summer and he was talking about needing to keep all the windows closed, and I asked why, and he said to keep the spiders out. And I said, what are you talking about? And this is a relationship I've obviously had all my life with my dad, never spoken about spiders at all. Turns out he is terrified of spiders. My dad has a phobia of spiders, and I recalled then an example where I was obviously very young and I was probably sitting in my bed and my dad was reading this story and a spider was on the wall and my dad freaked out. And I didn't really think much of it and I obviously forgot it, but it came back to me as a memory. I would have been very young, maybe about 5 years old, something along those lines. And I realised that my dad's fear of spiders had translated onto me. That's called social learning theory. Albert Bandura and Skinner basically put these theories together, which tell us that when we observe behaviour in other people, we learn from that behaviour, we learn the rules of engagement within that behaviour, and also how to then respond as a result of a situation. So effectively, I wasn't afraid of spiders until I watched my dad be afraid of spiders, and because I trusted my dad, I trusted that that was the way to respond to spiders. And then suddenly inside here I have a fear of spiders that then developed over time. Basically, I taught myself to be frightened of spiders by watching other people being frightened of spiders. So it could have been anything. My dad could have been frightened of mice or paintbrushes. It just happened to be spiders. Classic phobia. Now, the way that I actually made the decision was that I'd gone to an event and there was one of these travelling sort of tropical experiences. So there's like a portable greenhouse in a porta cabin where they had spiders and lizards and things. And I didn't want to go anywhere near it because I was terrified there was a spider in there. And I watched this child who's probably about 4 years old handling a tarantula, and she had no fear whatsoever. And so there was this 4-year-old girl who was literally doing the thing that me at that time, being about 43, 44 years old, was absolutely terrified of. And I just thought, how ridiculous am I that I've been carrying this fear that this child simply doesn't have? And wouldn't it be wonderful to have that confidence of that kid to be able to do this really terrifying thing? Wouldn't that make a huge difference to my life? And I made the decision on that day that I refused to allow that fear to take over. I went to another event and there was another one of these tropical greenhouses, and I was with my wife and I said to her, I am going to handle a spider today. So I went up to the people in the greenhouse and I said, look, I'm a lifelong arachnophobe, I'm absolutely terrified of spiders and I don't want to be. Is it possible that I could do the thing with you that is of most fear to me? So they said, okay, then we can do this. We do this a lot with kids in schools and help them understand things. They said, so you can handle a spider, but we have to do it on the ground because these are really delicate creatures. And I was thinking, a spider, a tarantula, is not a delicate creature. They are terrifying objects. You know, they are these huge things that could drag you off into caves and wrap you up in their own webs and completely take over it. And they said, no, they're actually really quite delicate creatures. They're very fragile, and if you held them at a height of maybe 3 or 4 feet and then dropped them, you could do them a great deal of damage. I never knew that because I don't look at spider knowledge because I'm frightened of spiders. So we agreed. So I got a pair of gloves, and the lady very gradually had the spider in her own hand. There's no spiders in this particular segment, by the way. She had the spider in this hand and she gradually just tipped it over into my hand, and I had the glove, and my heart was beating like I could not believe. I was kind of rigid, but at the same time curious. I wanted to know what was going to happen. My fear was that it would scuttle up my arm and somehow, you know, put itself on my face like in an Alien movie. And it didn't. It just sat there and did absolutely nothing. And I could barely feel it through the glove, but I could see it. And it was almost like the hand wasn't really mine, but I knew it was. So I moved my fingers just a little bit like this, and the spider moved, and there was this surge of adrenaline in my system. My heart started beating faster, and I just stayed there for a couple of minutes, and the lady moved away, and by this time there was a crowd of people expecting me to start crying, and I just stayed there and allowed this spider to sit on my hand. This is the flooding, right? I'm doing now in that moment the thing that I was most frightened of happening in my entire life, that a tarantula would be on me. It's a Chilean tarantula. It's fairly significant, but certainly not the biggest in the world. I've got this spider in my hand and I'm doing okay. My heart starts calming down a bit and I become curious. I move my finger and it moves gently and I'm okay with it. And I move my finger and it moves gently and I'm okay with it. And it starts becoming something that I was interested in. I started looking at it and thinking, you're actually quite sweet. You don't really want to run at my arm and jump on my face. You don't want to do anything. You just want to sit still and not move. It was just really, really interesting. And the lady was saying that actually many people are more frightened by the small spiders because they move so quickly. The big spiders actually don't really move very much at all. They just want to eat and sleep and do not much else. We got to the end of it and the lady took the tarantula back and I took my glove off and I stayed there for a few seconds just contemplating what I'd done and feeling good about it. And she looked at me and she said, "Do you want to try it without the glove?" And I was like, "Not in the slightest," and yes, I absolutely do, all at once. I took the glove off and she came back to me with a spider, and again she just said, reaffirmed the message about not dropping this spider in case I hurt it, and then she put the spider back on my hand. And that's possibly one of the greatest moments of my life right there. I felt fantastic. And it didn't do me any harm, my heart was still beating, but it was more excitement than fear. The same emotion, the same expression, same physical expression, but I stopped being frightened of this thing and I actually quite enjoyed its company. Which sounds like a really strange thing to say, that literally 10 minutes before that I was utterly terrified of tarantulas, and then I had in my hand a tarantula on the palm of my hand and I felt really good about it. I was enjoying the moment. Stayed there for maybe 2 or 3 minutes and I was totally fine, and I said to the lady, "You can take the tarantula back." She held her hand out and it just sort of, it moved, it walked from my hand to hers, and then I stood up and I put a donation in the box for her and I thanked her very much and I gave my wife a big hug, and I walked away from that knowing that I was no longer afraid of spiders. Now don't get me wrong, I don't like them and I wouldn't want one as a pet, but I absolutely am not frightened of them. If I see them now, I just go towards them with a little pot and a card and I move them in and I just carry them out into the garden and I just let them go. I've got no interest in them anymore. They're in the vicinity, there are spiders in the world and I'm no longer frightened of them, and I have to say it feels wonderful. I know now that if I went to bed and I saw a spider in the room, I could go to sleep. That is incredible, and it took less than 10 minutes to effectively flood my fear out of my system. Again, this isn't for everybody, so this is the nature of my personality. I wouldn't recommend doing this to anyone unless they were absolutely certain that they were going to be okay with it. So it comes down to the time that you spend with your therapist overcoming a phobia, working out the best approach for you. So this is a self-help guide, but I would still recommend you get some advice or to understand the nature of your personality and what works best for you. So the spider picture on the wall in a couple of my early videos, which quite a few people have mentioned, there's a couple of comments that I'll try and put up here, but I drew that picture because I wanted to really immerse myself in the world of a spider. So that meant that I had to spend hours looking at a photograph of a mouse spider in order to accurately draw it as best as I could do. The picture on the wall is effectively my celebration to myself. It was a constant, permanent reminder to me that I had achieved something significant in my life. I had spent hours and hours and hours really looking at the detail of anatomy of a spider in order to draw this picture, and at no point during that did I feel the fear that I would have done had I never done this self-help. Part of my job as a clinical psychologist and part of my passion for this work is to help other people gain this confidence and feel power, feel strength, feel agency, confidence, to be able to take on the things that they really don't feel that they can take on and move towards it. So whether this is a trauma thing, whether this is a dissociative thing, or whether this is a lifestyle type thing, doing that thing that you're frightened of doing and overcoming it because it is in your way. It's a barrier to you progressing to being the person that you want to be. I really hope this video has been useful. if it helps a single person overcome something in their life that they're terrified of, it will have been worth it. So thank you very much for listening. I hope this one has been okay for you. Please leave any comments below, subscribe if you would like to be part of future content that I release, and have a great day. Thank you very much.